I was the orphan of a martyr, and I had fallen in love with Oliver, a city intellectual who came to our village. In my effort to pursue him, I humbled myself, endured hunger to save food rations for him, but he always treated me with disdain, until the day the village chief announced that, as a martyr's orphan, I could secure a spot for my husband to return to the city. That was when Oliver finally agreed to marry me. But once he got the city spot, he began to despise me. He flaunted his relationship with his confidante, Ava, right in front of me. Zoe, you're just a village girl. You think you're good enough to return to the city with me? You're a disgrace. The only reason I married you was for that spot. Not for you, to force a divorce. Oliver even accused me of having an affair with a local bachelor. I couldn't take the villagers' harsh gossip and judgment, so I drank pesticide. As I writhed in pain and lost consciousness, I thought it was the end, but when I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day before our engagement. This time, when the village chief asked me who I wanted to marry, offering to help arrange the marriage, I didn't hesitate. I chose Diego, the most politically unfavorable intellectual in the village. Why? Because in my previous life, when I drank the pesticide and everyone avoided me as if I were a plague, he was the only one who carried me to the hospital. Chapter 1. Zoe, who gave you permission to go to the village chief and ask him to arrange a marriage? Did I say I was going to marry you? Don't you know what it means to have self-respect? Even if you're from the countryside, you should at least have some dignity. Just as I walked out of the village chief's house, I heard Oliver's irritated voice behind me. I stopped for a moment and said, I didn't say I wanted to marry you. Oliver let out a cold laugh, looking at me with disdain. I heard it, Zoe. When Ava went inside, I was standing outside the window and heard everything. The village chief asked you who you liked. Now you're still lying? Do you really think a deceitful woman like you is someone I would ever be interested in? I glanced at Ava, who stood silently by his side, and felt speechless. Did you not hear what I said after that? Ava remained quiet, but Oliver quickly responded. Why would Ava, someone as refined as her, continue listening to such shameless nonsense? Ava gently tugged at Oliver's sleeve and softly said, Oliver, don't be mad at Zoe. You're such an outstanding person. It's only natural for her to want to marry you. Oliver didn't even bother to look at me. She's not worthy. Even though I no longer loved him, those 3 words still stung. In my previous life, Oliver constantly belittled me, telling me over and over that I was just a country girl, that I wasn't good enough. So when he finally agreed to marry me, I was so overjoyed that I completely lost myself, humbly fulfilling his every demand. Back then, I believed that being able to marry Oliver was a gift, a blessing, and I didn't care about anything else. I was such a fool, but this time, I wouldn't degrade myself for him. Not again. I shook my head, turned around, and started walking away. I didn't want to waste another word on them, but Oliver blocked my path and impatiently said, Ava's wheat field hasn't been fully harvested. Go help her finish cutting it. Ava quietly added, There's no need. I can do it myself. Oliver looked at her with concern. How could I let that happen? Your hands are meant for holding books and writing, not for swinging a sickle. Zoe can do it. I glanced down at my calloused hands and smiled faintly. Sure. Oliver smiled smugly. He had already calculated that I would agree. In my previous life, it was always like this. Oliver would openly flirt with Ava right in front of me. Whenever I felt dejected and on the verge of giving up, Oliver would casually explain that he and Ava were just friends. Then, he would ask me to help him with the farm work. Back then, I didn't think of myself as Oliver's free labor. Instead, I felt happy, thinking that Oliver needed me, that he found me useful and capable. I believed that if I worked just a little harder, I could win his heart. So, I worked tirelessly to help him with the farm work, even though a large portion of it was Ava's responsibility. I thought that by being obedient and diligent, I could make Oliver fall in love with me. It wasn't until I drank the pesticide that I realized the truth. The more obedient I was, the more he despised me. Chapter 2. Zoe, since you've agreed, hurry up and get it done. Don't waste time. I don't like women who dawdle. Oliver's voice sounded behind me, interrupting my thoughts. I nodded and asked, Sure, I'll help harvest the wheat, but whose work points will it count toward? We should clarify this now. Oliver frowned and said, You're seriously worried about Ava's work points? Zoe, you're so petty. I'm asking for a favor, and you're already calculating gains and losses? I'm telling you now, if you ever want me to have a good impression of you, stop acting like a stingy country girl who's always scheming. My expression hardened, and I replied coldly, What's wrong with being from the countryside? It's the land of us rural people that feeds you city folks. What makes you think you're superior? You're not better than us. Also, let me make this clear, I have no interest in marrying you. I never did, and I never will. With that, I turned and walked away. Fuming, Oliver stood stunned for a moment, then sneered, Wow, Zoe, you've grown bold. Trying to play hard to get? You don't even have what it takes. What a pathetic imitation. Let me tell you, if you don't help Ava finish harvesting the wheat before nightfall, don't expect me to speak to you again. Ava gently pulled on Oliver's arm and said softly, Don't be angry, Oliver. I heard they're showing a movie in the next village. Let's go watch it together. The two of them left, and as they walked away, Oliver couldn't resist throwing another insult my way. It was clear they had no intention of finishing the harvest. As for me, I certainly wasn't going to help them either, but as I reached my house, I noticed large groups of ants fighting fiercely, a sure sign of incoming heavy rain. If the wheat wasn't harvested quickly, it would all rot in the fields. As someone born and raised in the countryside, I couldn't bear to see such waste. After a moment of thought, I headed to the village chief's house again. After I explained the situation, the village chief nodded repeatedly. Ava's always slow when it comes to farm work. I've been considering having someone else take over the harvest. You go ahead and harvest it. I'll make sure the work points are recorded under your name. You won't be taken advantage of. I thanked him and was about to leave when he called me back. You used to have a crush on Oliver, didn't you? So why did you choose Diego instead? That Diego, he's hardworking and has a decent character. But his family background isn't great. His parents were university professors before being sent to a labor reform farm during the political campaigns. Marrying him could affect your future, and your children might blame you one day. I smiled and replied, I don't care about my future. I care about his character. I like that he's well-read and tells good stories. The village chief nodded. All right then. A few days ago, I sent him to the provincial capital to buy seeds. When he returns, I'll ask for his opinion. He shook his head and muttered, Lucky guy. I arrived at the wheat field and saw that all the other sections had already been harvested. Only Ava's section remained, the wheat standing neatly in rows, glaringly out of place. I grabbed my sickle and began cutting the wheat bundle by bundle. Chapter 3. I wasn't sure why, but Diego came to mind. In my past life, after drinking the pesticide and lying on the verge of death, it was Diego who carried me to the hospital. I cried from the pain the entire way, and Diego, trying to distract me, told me many stories. The last one I remember was the tale of the cowherd and the weaver girl. When the story ended, so did my life. The last thing I heard was Diego's choked voice as he whispered, Zoe, you're the weaver girl, sent to the mortal world to endure hardships. Now you're going back to the sky to become a star. But I'm not the cowherd. I don't even have the ability to meet you once a year. Lost in the bittersweet mixture of memory and emotion, I finished harvesting the wheat. I let out a sigh, stood up, and stretched my sore back. Just then, mocking voices reached my ears. Well, isn't this Zoe again? Here to do Ava's work for her? She's trying to please Oliver by buttering up Ava first. Clever move. Clever but stupid. Oliver and Ava were first loves, a couple even before they came to the countryside. Zoe can try all she wants, but she's just setting herself up to wear a green hat. I wouldn't be surprised if Oliver and Ava had a baby, and Zoe happily volunteered to care for the newborn during postpartum confinement. The speakers were other educated youth from the same city as Oliver. In my previous life, in order to win Oliver's approval, I had always been polite and accommodating to his friends, even going so far as to curry favor with them. Over time, they had become increasingly bold in front of me, treating me with less and less respect. My face darkened as I gripped the sickle and walked toward them. What did you just say? They must have sensed my shift in demeanor because they hesitated, looking a little nervous. Still, one of them responded defiantly. "What do you mean? You must have misheard us. Besides, are we not allowed to talk while you're allowed to act shamelessly?" "Exactly. If you don't respect yourself, you can't blame others." I raised the sickle, pointing it directly at the ringleader, and said coldly, "In our village, people who spread gossip usually get beaten up." The girl turned pale, clearly frightened. At this moment, someone, as if spotting a savior, excitedly called out, "Oliver is here." I turned my head and saw Oliver walking hand in hand with Ava along the edge of the field. As they approached, they let go of each other's hands in perfect unison. Oliver looked at the harvested wheat, nodded in satisfaction, and said to me, "Not bad this time, seeing as you've shown a good attitude in admitting your mistakes. You're allowed to attend Ava's birthday tomorrow." The other educated youth chuckled knowingly. In the past, whenever anyone had a birthday, Oliver would invite me, not because I was popular, but because I was foolish enough to bring rice, flour, oil, vegetables, and eggs, and then work myself to exhaustion cooking for them, serving tea, and cleaning up after the party. I had naively thought that Oliver invited me because he cared for me and wanted to integrate me into his circle. Now, I realized he had treated me like a maid, a fool who could be taken advantage of. I responded coldly, "No, thanks. I'm not interested in your birthday party." Oliver's face immediately darkened. In front of his friends, he felt humiliated by my rejection, and his anger flared up. He stepped closer to me, towering over me, and said, "I barely praised you, and now you've forgotten where you stand? Zoe, I'm doing you a favor by inviting you. Who do you think you are? If it weren't for you clinging to me like a leech, do you think I'd even acknowledge you?" Furious, I glared at him and raised my voice. "Oliver, let me say it one more time, I don't like you, and I have nothing to do with you. From now on, you go your way, and I'll go mine." Chapter 4. The educated youth surrounding us began to hoot and jeer. All eyes focused on Oliver. Feeling humiliated and unable to back down, Oliver pushed me hard, sending me falling into the wheat field. "Zoe, remember what you said today. Don't come crawling back to me like a pathetic dog," he sneered, his words venomous. "You, a parentless orphan, thinking you can marry me? Keep dreaming. You're full of flaws. Nothing but a poorly raised brat with no manners." I trembled with rage. My entire body was shaking as I stood up and slapped him hard across the face. "What right do you have to insult my parents? They died heroes, sacrificing their lives to fight floods and save others. They're 1,000 times more noble than you will ever be." Oliver was momentarily stunned by my slap, but when he came to his senses, fury overtook him, and he kicked me in the stomach. I clutched my abdomen, the pain causing me to curl up on the ground. Then, Oliver pulled off the wristwatch I had given him and threw it forcefully next to me. "This piece of junk, I don't want it. Take it back." That watch had been my father's keepsake. To please Oliver, I had gifted it to him. Never in my wildest imagination did I think he would treat it so carelessly and toss it to the ground. In a mix of desperation and humiliation, I crawled to pick up the watch, but the damage had already been done. The watch had struck the edge of the sickle and was broken. My father's last keepsake. Destroyed. Holding the broken watch in my hands, tears streamed uncontrollably down my face. I looked up, only to see Oliver walking away, hand in hand with Ava. The very object I had treasured meant absolutely nothing to him. At that moment, the village loudspeaker blared to life with the voice of the village chief. "Zoe, Zoe, come to my house right away. There's good news." I wiped my tears, carefully placed the broken watch in my pocket, and fastened the button before heading toward the village chief's house. I hadn't expected Oliver to catch up to me and block my path again. His face was dark and stormy as he demanded, "Zoe, what's going on? What's this good news about?" I was in no mood to humor him. How would I know? "Move aside." Oliver scoffed coldly. "Don't think I don't know. It's probably about the village chief matchmaking for the two of us." He pointed his finger at me in warning. "I'm telling you right now, don't even think about it. If you try, I'll publicly reject you and make sure you can't show your face around here ever again." I had no patience for him anymore. Get lost. Oliver froze. Stunned, he couldn't believe that the once submissive and obedient me had the audacity to tell him to get lost. His hands clenched into fists as he growled. What did you say? I raised the sickle in my hand and calmly replied. Oliver, if you try to touch me again, don't expect me to be polite. He didn't expect me to be so cold, and he froze on the spot. Without sparing him another glance, I headed straight to the village chief's house. As soon as I walked in, I saw Diego sitting there nervously. He glanced up at me briefly before quickly lowering his head again. He didn't speak, but I could see the subtle smile in his eyes and the faint curve at the corners of his mouth. The village chief, puffing on his tobacco pipe, laughed heartily. This kid, what a sneaky heart he has. Turns out, he's had his eye on you for a while now. As soon as I mentioned you, he was so happy he sang a segment of a model opera for me. Diego, come on. Give us another round. How about the part with Auntie Ching? Diego laughed awkwardly, a trace of embarrassment on his face. Chief, come on. Have some mercy on me. We exchanged a glance, and in that moment, a trace of sweetness filled the air between us. The village chief laughed out loud. You both agree. So that's settled then. Here in the countryside, we don't fuss over fancy rituals. Consider me your witness. This counts as your engagement. After the harvest, I'll pick a good day, and we'll hold the wedding. Diego, if you ever dare mistreat Zoe, I'll skin you alive. Diego nodded repeatedly, eager to reassure him. Then, the village chief turned to me. Zoe, Diego may have a problematic background, but his character is solid. You better not look down on him or bring up his family's past to hurt him. If you do, I won't let you off easily. I nodded sincerely, fully understanding the weight of his words. Just then, a mailman from the town rushed in, panting heavily. Chief, there's an urgent message from the county. I caught sight of the big, bold letters on the envelope, top secret, and quickly pulled Diego outside with me. As we were about to leave through the gate, the village chief called after us. Remember, you're only engaged, not married yet. No fooling around. Diego had been about to take my hand, but he quickly withdrew it at the village chief's words, his face flushing with embarrassment. Blushing as well, I spat playfully. The older the village chief gets, the thicker his skin becomes. The sky had already turned dark, and Diego needed to take the newly purchased seeds to the warehouse. We parted ways outside the village chief's house, taking a few steps before turning back to look at each other, reluctant to part. Chapter 5. After dinner, the loudspeaker crackled again. Attention villagers. There's a meeting at the threshing ground. At least one person from each household must attend. Zoe, this concerns you, so be sure to come. I quickly washed my face and rushed toward the threshing ground. Halfway there, a large hand suddenly gripped my arm tightly. I yelped in pain. Then, I heard Oliver's voice. Zoe, I've warned you before, and yet you're still so shameless? I shook off his hand and glared at him. Oliver, can you just give it a rest? Angrily, he spat. So what if your parents were martyrs? You had the village chief call a meeting just to force me to marry you? I'm telling you now, I'm not falling for your tricks. Even if the King of Heaven himself came down, he couldn't make me do it. Let me be clear today, I'm with Ava, and we're a couple. Just give it up already. I raised my voice. Oliver, you're delusional. Who told you this meeting was about matchmaking? Do you really think you're that important, that the village chief would gather everyone just for you? Oliver hadn't expected me to speak so sarcastically. His face contorted with anger, and he shoved me roughly. Fine. Keep playing dumb. Let's see how humiliated you'll be in a bit. Ava was right. You're the kind of woman who clings desperately to others without any dignity. I'll make sure to embarrass you so badly that you'll finally understand you never had a chance. I've been too soft on you before. This is all your fault. Zoe, when the meeting starts, don't you dare cry. Oliver stormed off toward the meeting, fuming with anger. I shook my head and muttered, what a lunatic. As I arrived at the threshing ground, I scanned the crowd but didn't see Diego. He was probably still at the warehouse, unable to make it in time. The village chief stood on a large stone, His eyes slightly red as he addressed the crowd. Everyone in our village knows about the flood 3 years ago. Zoe's parents gave their lives to save our village. The government has officially recognized them as martyrs. They were awarded a certificate of honor and a commemorative watch. Over the years, we've all done our best to take care of Zoe. But I've always felt it wasn't enough. No amount of help could truly make up for her loss. But now, a new policy has come down from above. Zoe, along with her spouse, whoever she marries, will be granted the opportunity to move to the city. If she marries a fellow villager, both of them can become factory workers and earn wages while enjoying city benefits. If she marries a city-educated youth, they'll be allowed to return to the city, and the government will arrange jobs for them. The village chief's voice wavered slightly with emotion. The nation hasn't forgotten Zoe. Let me see anyone dare to say she's at a disadvantage or that she's hard to marry off. Whoever marries Zoe is truly lucky. This is the kind of fortune that can change a family's destiny. The village chief continued to speak passionately, but the threshing ground was already in chaos. Everyone was talking excitedly, and countless pairs of eyes were fixed on me. The villagers, who had lived through the flood, were teary-eyed at the mention of my parents. I could feel their genuine happiness for me. As for the city-educated youths, they weren't familiar with my family's story. Their gazes were a mix of envy and jealousy, especially directed toward Oliver. They all assumed Oliver would be the one to claim the spot and return to the city. And Oliver assumed the same thing. Chapter 6. He strutted up to me, smirking coldly as he said, "No wonder you've been acting like such a shrew today. All aggressive and overconfident. Looks like you already heard the news and think you have some leverage over me. Huh? Zoe, you really know how to calculate things, don't you? But let me tell you, it won't work." I nodded calmly. "You're right, it won't work. I don't like you, and I won't marry you. So, you won't be getting the city spot." Oliver was so stunned by my response that he couldn't even speak. Furious, he spat out, "No point in talking further." He turned to leave, but Ava, standing nearby, frantically signaled him with her eyes. With a sigh, Oliver turned back toward me and said, "Zoe, don't blame me for not giving you a chance. If you apologize for what you did today, I might consider forgiving you. And who knows, maybe dating you isn't entirely out of the question." I couldn't help but find Oliver utterly ridiculous. How did I ever fall for him in my past life? Mocking him, I said, "Oh, so, have you broken up with Ava?" He was silent for a couple of seconds before replying, "Actually, Ava and I were never really together. I was just upset by the way you spoke to me today, so I pretended to be close to her to make you jealous." I continued my sarcastic attack. "Wow, Oliver, I never knew you were so devoted to me. This must be the same Oliver who's been bossing me around, scolding me for every little thing, right?" A flicker of a smile appeared on his face. "I get it now. You think that now you've gained some power, you can finally call me out for embarrassing you before. Fine, if it's your pride you want, I can give you that. Since I like you, what's the harm in giving you some face? But remember, Zoe, I'm only giving you face because I like you. Don't push your luck." Before I could respond, Oliver strode over to the stone where the village chief had been standing earlier and took on the appearance of someone about to make a grand speech. The crowd fell silent, watching him with curiosity. With a warm smile, Oliver began, "Everyone knows that Zoe has been pursuing me for a while. The truth is, I already said yes, but I feel like I haven't given her the proper recognition she deserves. So, with everyone gathered here today, I'd like to make our relationship official." He turned toward me, gazing deeply into my eyes, and spoke in that smooth, city boy way. "Zoe, I love you. Marry me." The city youths cheered and clapped, and soon, the villagers joined in. Everyone knew how long I had chased after Oliver, so to them, this seemed like the natural outcome. But I shook my head. "I don't love you, and I can't agree." The crowd fell silent. Everyone stared at me in shock. Oliver stood on the stone platform, clearly cornered and suppressing his anger as he gritted his teeth. "Zoe, don't test my patience." I stared coldly at him. "I'm serious, I don't like you. I also know that you've never liked me. Your so-called confession today is just about securing my city spot. In fact, I bet you're scheming to have me give the spot to Ava instead." Aren't you? Oliver's face flushed with rage as I hit the nail on the head. Embarrassed in front of the crowd, he seemed to snap into madness. He pointed a finger at me and shouted, "Zoe, even with the city spot, you're just a country girl. You should be lighting incense and thanking the heavens if you want to be worthy of me. I'm only giving you this one chance. Are you marrying me or not? Don't be ungrateful. You've been trailing me like a shadow for years, just waiting for this day. What are you pretending for now?" Suddenly, a tall figure strode over. It was Diego. Even with Oliver standing on the stone platform, he was still a head shorter than Diego. Diego reached out his strong hand and grabbed Oliver's wrist firmly. "Oliver, how dare you bully my fiancé while I'm not around?" Diego said, his face dark with anger. The entire crowd was stunned by Diego's presence. Oliver yanked his arm away and rubbed his wrist, sneering. "Diego, you're Zoe's fiancé? Are you still dreaming? Wake up, man. Do you even know your background? You're delusional if you think you're the prince in this story." The other city youths chimed in, mocking him. "Exactly. Diego, even a country girl wouldn't settle for you. You think this is your hero moment where Zoe falls for you? What a joke." The city youths had always looked down on Diego because of his background and often isolated him. Now, they were enjoying the opportunity to humiliate him. However, Diego had built strong relationships with the local villagers. A few of them immediately stepped forward to defend him. Without hesitation, I stepped to Diego's side and, in front of everyone, grabbed his hand. The crowd fell silent instantly. I looked at them all and said with determination, "I love Diego. We're already engaged, and he's my fiancé." The crowd, once silent, now buzzed with whispers. Some people even murmured enviously about Diego's good fortune. Oliver's face contorted as rage, humiliation, and resentment flickered through him like a storm. Then, as if struck by a sudden realization, he let out a bitter laugh and said, "Zoe, you really know how to put on a show. You brought Diego here just to make me jealous, didn't you? Let me tell you something, I don't respond to pressure. The more you push, the more I despise you. So apologize to me right now. And maybe, just maybe, I'll forgive you." Diego and I both stared at him, utterly speechless. I said, "Diego and I really are engaged. The village chief knows it too." "Oliver, give up on your delusions." Oliver's face twisted further in disbelief. "I'm the one with delusions? You're calling me delusional? You, a mere country girl, dare to say that to me?" Oliver's aggressive demeanor made Diego frown slightly. Chapter 7. Diego strode up to Oliver with large, powerful steps. He towered over Oliver, and with the strength he'd built from years of farm work, he exuded an intimidating aura as he looked down at him. Oliver was clearly rattled. He tried to maintain a tough exterior but couldn't hide his fear. "What do you want? Don't forget about your background." Diego's gaze turned icy as he replied, "A bad background? Sure, but my fists are still strong." "Oliver, if you ever bully my fiancé again, don't blame me for being impolite." Then, Diego shifted slightly and bumped Oliver with his shoulder. It didn't seem like Diego used much force, but Oliver staggered backward several steps, nearly falling over. He glared at Diego, furious but ultimately too scared to retaliate. Suddenly, Oliver ran to the village chief, his tone desperate and panicked. Diego must have known about the new policy ahead of time. He exploited a loophole and tricked Zoe into this. "Village chief, aren't you going to do something about it?" The village chief had been silently observing the scene, taking long drags from his pipe. At that moment, he calmly raised his head, speaking slowly and deliberately. The two of them were already engaged before the new policy came down. I was the witness. They're truly in love, with no ulterior motives. I've seen it with my own eyes. Oliver looked as though he'd been struck by lightning. He collapsed onto the ground, sitting there dazed. The village chief then pointed his pipe at him. "But you, Oliver, you've been scheming and hopping around, eating from one bowl while eyeing the next. Did you really think nobody noticed? You think you're the only smart one in the world while the rest of us are fools? Well, let me be honest with you, thank goodness Zoe didn't choose you. If she had, I'd be lying awake at night from the sheer frustration of it." With that, the village chief clasped his hands behind his back and walked off. The villagers chuckled and whispered amongst themselves, mocking Oliver in hushed tones. As night fell, the crowd dispersed, leaving only Oliver sitting in the middle of the empty threshing ground, clutching his hair in frustration. Even Ava, whom he cherished so much, was nowhere to be seen. Chapter 8. The village chief had already chosen the wedding date for me and Diego. Once the autumn harvest was over, we would start making arrangements. Diego and I had begun dreaming about our life together, but I didn't expect that. One morning, Lucas's mother would come storming to my house, yelling and banging on the door while hurling curses at me. Confused, I opened the door, only to see a crowd of onlookers already gathered outside. Lucas's mother was waving a piece of women's undergarment in the air, pointing at me as she shouted, "Zoe, you're young, but you sure are shameless. How dare you use this to seduce my son?" My heart sank. In my previous life, Oliver had falsely accused me of having an affair with Lucas. I thought that by choosing Diego this time around, I could avoid this trap, but it seemed like fate was still determined to frame me. I scanned the crowd and, sure enough, I spotted Ava and Oliver standing at the corner. They weren't watching the commotion like the others, they had their heads down, whispering and plotting something. I knew immediately that this situation with Lucas was their doing. Lucas's mother threw the undergarment at me, her hands on her hips as she demanded, "Zoe, what are you going to do about this? You need to give me an explanation today." I calmly asked her, "What kind of solution are you looking for?" Lucas's mother grinned slyly and said, "Since you and my son have been caught in such an unclear situation, the only solution is for you two to get married." I couldn't help but laugh at how ridiculous her suggestion was. Lucas was mentally challenged, with the intelligence of a 6 or 7-year-old. Despite being over 30 years old, he had never been able to find a wife. And now, she expected me to marry him? Unbelievable. As if her absurd proposal wasn't enough, she added, "Once you've secured the city job and moved, as your mother-in-law, I won't ask for much, just half of your wages will do." I rolled my eyes and showed no mercy. "Keep dreaming." Lucas's mother immediately threw herself to the ground, slapping her thigh and wailing loudly, "There's no justice in this world. Zoe seduced my son and brought disgrace upon our family. I can't go on living. I'm going to hang myself right here at her doorstep." The crowd grew larger as curious onlookers gathered, whispering amongst themselves. If this continued, rumors would spread, and it would become even harder to explain. I stepped forward and shouted, "You claim I seduced your son? Where's the evidence?" I pointed at the undergarment on the ground. "Don't use this to frame me. Who knows where you stole it from? If you want my city placement so badly, at least use a more respectable method." Lucas's mother yanked Lucas out of the crowd and dragged him forward. "My son is an honest man. He never tells lies." "Lucas, tell everyone what happened." Drooling and grinning foolishly, Lucas said, "Last night, I was catching grasshoppers outside the village. Sister Zoe pulled me behind a big tree and gave me a piece of clothing. She said she wanted to marry me." The crowd erupted into chaos. Everyone knew that while Lucas was slow and mentally challenged, he did have a reputation for being honest and never lying. The villagers began murmuring, "I never expected Zoe to be this kind of woman. Isn't this a disgrace to her parents' memory? She's that desperate for a man?" I could tell back when she used to follow Oliver around like a lovesick puppy. This girl's always had a restless nature. Isn't she engaged to Diego? Why would she be messing around with Lucas? Well, they're only engaged, not married yet. Maybe Diego's too much of a blockhead to fool around with her beforehand. There's one advantage to being with Lucas, though. He's too simple to resist her. She could do whatever she wanted, and he'd just let her. She must have already had her fun. Just look at that, she even took off her underclothes. The more the villagers gossiped, the nastier their words became. Lucas's mother, however, grew happier the more she heard. Sitting on the ground, slapping her thigh, she shouted, "Zoe, either you marry my son, or I'll report you for misconduct and have you thrown in jail." In my previous life, her threats, coupled with the villagers' cruel gossip, had broken me. It drove me to despair, and I drank the pesticide that ended my life. But this time, what should I do? Chapter 9. Just then, Oliver walked over, He cleared his throat lightly and said to Lucas's mother, "Can I say something fair and reasonable? Zoe just made a mistake. And it's her first offense. We're all neighbors, don't make a big deal out of this. Making her marry your son doesn't seem right either. After all, she's the daughter of martyrs. Ruining her life wouldn't sit well with the village chief. And you know it." Lucas's mother hesitated for a moment. But I can't just let Zoe get away with it. Wait. Why would marrying my son ruin her life? Are you insulting us? Oliver ignored her question and continued. How about this? Take all of Zoe's work points for this year as compensation. Does that sound fair? Lucas's mother thought about it for a moment and then reluctantly nodded. She understood that the village chief wouldn't let her force me into marriage anyway. Oliver turned to me with a seemingly sincere expression. Zoe, your reputation is ruined now, and Diego will surely break off the engagement. But that's okay. We used to care for each other, didn't we? I'm willing to marry you. I won't hold this against you. I scoffed, my voice icy. I'd rather drink pesticide. Oliver's face darkened. Don't be an ungrateful dog biting the hand that feeds you. Just then, a voice rang out from nearby. Oliver, judging by the way you're acting all high and mighty, I almost thought you were the village chief already. I turned and immediately felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was Diego, and the village chief had come with him. For some reason, just seeing Diego made me feel incredibly grounded. Diego walked over and gently placed his hand on my back. That small gesture made my eyes sting with tears. I knew he trusted me. He was telling me that he was here, standing by my side. Diego looked at Oliver and said, "The truth hasn't even come out yet, and you're already helping Zoe admit guilt? Tell me, who do you think you are? What business do you have interfering in our family's matters? Oliver, your petty tricks are disgusting and not the least bit manly. I despise them." With that, he gave Oliver a shove. This time, Diego used more force, and Oliver fell hard onto the ground amidst the crowd. Diego then approached Lucas with a warm smile and asked, "Lucas, did Zoe really give you clothes last night?" Lucas nodded enthusiastically. "Yup, Zoe said she was gonna be my wife." Diego smiled kindly and asked, "What was she wearing last night?" Lucas blinked in confusion. "It was dark, I couldn't see." Diego continued, "Then how did you know it was Zoe?" Lucas replied, "She told me so." She said she was Zoe, but her voice sounded different from usual. As soon as Lucas said this, the crowd burst into murmurs and whispers. Everyone there was starting to put the pieces together. Diego stayed calm, still smiling as he asked, "Was there anything else different about this Zoe from last night?" Lucas thought for a moment before saying, "She smelled really nice, so nice it made me want to sneeze." Diego exchanged a glance with the village chief, who nodded and said, "Bring over all the women in the village who are around Zoe's age. Let Lucas smell them one by one." I glanced around and saw Ava trying to sneak away. I immediately called out, "Ava, where are you going?" Chapter 10. When Ava heard me call her name, she ran even faster. But two elder women quickly intercepted her and brought her back by force. When Ava stood before Lucas, his eyes lit up. "It's that smell. Hey, but you're not Zoe," one of the elder women suddenly exclaimed. "That's right. The smell on Ava is, what's it called, perfume. Nobody else in the village has it, only she does. Her relatives from the city sent it to her, and she showed it off around the village for days." Ava's face turned deathly pale, and she desperately looked to Oliver for help. "Oliver, help me, please." I sneered coldly. "Ava, looks like you're the one who's desperate for a man. Why don't you marry Lucas instead?" Lucas's mother's eyes lit up. Ava would be perfect. Ava was completely petrified and grabbed Oliver's arm in a panic. "Oliver, say something. You know I didn't do anything." Oliver awkwardly cleared his throat and, with difficulty, said to Lucas's mother, "Ava made a mistake, but it's her first offense. How about we show some leniency and let her compensate you with a year's worth of work points?" Before Lucas's mother could respond, Ava exploded in rage. "I'm not guilty of anything. I didn't do anything." Her voice trembled with anger as she yelled at Oliver. "Oliver, are you even a man? You know the truth, yet you're still framing me?" She spun around, pointing at everyone as she continued her tirade. "It was Oliver who ordered me to do this. He told me to frame Zoe. He said Zoe wouldn't want to marry an idiot. And once things got messy, he'd swoop in like a hero and win Zoe's approval, getting her city quota in the process." Lucas's mother rushed over and delivered a stinging slap to Ava's face, knocking her to the ground. "You're the real fool here. My son is simple and honest. He never lies." The village chief narrowed his eyes and looked at Oliver coldly. "What do you have to say for yourself now?" Oliver, still stubborn, said through clenched teeth, "I didn't do anything. Ava is making it all up." The village chief chuckled coldly. "We all know the truth, Oliver, whether you admit it or not. Everyone here sees you for what you are." Oliver continued to deny everything, and without direct evidence, the village chief couldn't do much. But the damage had already been done. Oliver's reputation in the village was utterly ruined. Not only did the villagers ignore him, but even the other educated youth distanced themselves. He became a complete outcast in the village. All the dirtiest, hardest work was left for him, and during any resource distribution, he was always the last to receive anything. As for opportunities like joining the army or applying to university, he had no chance at all. From then on, Oliver lived like a ghost in the village, lifeless and aimless. As for Ava, Lucas's mother insisted that Ava had seduced her son and demanded that she marry Lucas. Otherwise, she threatened to report Ava for indecency and have her jailed. Terrified, Ava weighed her options and, in the end, agreed to marry Lucas. Her plan had backfired spectacularly. She tried to trap me but ended up trapping herself. Meanwhile, Diego and I used the city quota to return to the city. Thanks to our hard work and willingness to learn, combined with the fact that Diego's parents had been reinstated in their jobs and were no longer burdened by their background, we thrived. Our factory even recommended both of us to attend university. Chapter 11. At the university, Diego and I coincidentally chose to major in hydraulic engineering. We shared the same dream, to control the flooding, and honored the memory of my parents. A few years later, we became well-known experts in water conservation and management. Our first assignment brought us back to our hometown to address the flooding issue. The day we returned, representatives from the county, town, township, and village all came to welcome us with excitement and even tears of joy, hopeful that we could solve the flood problems and bring stability to their lives. The county arranged for us to stay at a guest house, but we insisted on returning to the village where we had once lived. The village chief was still as healthy and energetic as ever, though his temples had turned gray. What surprised me most was seeing Oliver and Ava together again. As it turned out, after Ava married Lucas, she had a son within a year. However, Ava's lazy nature, her picky eating habits, and her constant complaints about wanting a divorce soon wore on Lucas's mother. Lucas's mother, fed up with Ava living in the house while doing no work and wasting food, agreed to their divorce. Lucas already had a son, so she wasn't worried about having someone to care for her in her old age. After the divorce, Ava's reputation was so bad that no one wanted to marry her. As for Oliver, now in his mid-30s, he was also considered undesirable due to his bad reputation and had been unable to find a wife. With no other options, the two of them ended up back together, but the love they once shared was long gone, replaced by frequent screaming matches in the dead of night. Ava often sported bruises around her eyes, and Oliver's face frequently bore scratch marks. Diego and I simply laughed it off. We had seen a much bigger world by then, and Oliver and Ava were nothing more than insignificant figures from a past we had long outgrown. But Oliver couldn't hide his jealousy when he saw us. His gaze lingered on Diego, filled with bitter resentment. He slouched as he walked home, muttering to himself like a madman. Someone nearby overheard him and reported that he was saying, "Zoe should have been mine. If I had married her, I'd be a college graduate, an expert just like them." That night, Oliver and Ava had another vicious argument. After returning to the village, Diego and I immediately began studying the local hydrology. It didn't take long for us to propose a flood control plan. We suggested building a dam to hold back the river and creating a comprehensive water management system for power generation, flood prevention, and irrigation. The county mobilized a large labor force to work on the project. After 3 months of intense labor, We finally completed the dam and successfully blocked the river. The hardest part was done, and the rest of the project seemed manageable. That night, we celebrated and then fell into a deep sleep from exhaustion. But in the middle of the night, terrified shouts jolted me awake. The dam has burst! The dam has burst! Everyone scrambled out of bed in panic. Thankfully, it was the dry season, so the damage was minimal. Had it been summer, the raging floodwaters could have devastated countless villages. To my surprise, Oliver rushed to the village chief, practically gleeful as he shouted, "I want to report something. Last night, it was Ava who secretly dug into the dam and caused the breach. Chief, since I've made this report, I should get credit for it. Maybe I can earn the next quota to return to the city?" The village chief shot him a look of contempt and ordered someone to bring Ava over. When Ava arrived, she initially tried to deny everything. Chapter 12. Later, Ava learned that it was Oliver who had reported her. In an instant, she lost her mind. Disheveled and hysterical, she pointed a trembling finger at Oliver. "It was you! You told me to sabotage the dam to get revenge on Zoe and Diego. Oliver, you're not human. You tricked me again. You tricked me again. You want to go back to the city? I'll make sure you'll never go back." Suddenly, Ava pulled out a pair of scissors from her clothes and stabbed Oliver in the chest with all her strength. No one had anticipated this scene, and there was no time to stop her. Blood gushed from Oliver's heart, staining his clothes as he collapsed onto the ground. His limbs twitched uncontrollably. With great effort, he turned his head toward me. His eyes were filled with despair as he asked, "Zoe, if I had agreed to marry you back then, would you have said yes?" I looked at him calmly and replied, "I still would have said the same thing. I'd rather drink pesticide." A bitter smile appeared on Oliver's face as he whispered, "I hate myself so much." And with that, he died, his eyes wide open and unable to find peace. Ava was immediately restrained on the spot. By the time the police arrived, she had already descended into madness. She was tied up and shoved into the police van, her wrists and ankles bound. From behind the metal bars, she grinned foolishly at me. "Zoe, you'll never be better than me. You couldn't get Oliver, but I did. I even married him. You're just a poor village girl. I bet you've never even sat in a car before. Huh, but look at me now. I'm sitting in one. Hee hee. Ha ha." With the troublemakers gone, the village returned to peace. The rest of the project went smoothly. 3 years later, the water management project was completed successfully. Just as we had planned, the dam provided power, irrigation, and flood control. The villagers from miles around no longer had to worry about the threat of floods. The village chief, along with the villagers, pooled their resources penny by penny to erect a monument next to the dam. On the monument were the names of everyone who had contributed to the project. At the very top were my parents' names. On the night before Diego and I left the village, we took a walk by the dam. I looked up and saw the sky dotted with countless stars. The Milky Way stretched across the heavens, and it was easy for me to spot Altair and Vega, the stars representing the cowherd and the weaver girl from the legend Diego had once told me. I held his hand, and a smile of pure happiness spread across my face.